A very good day to you. I am so excited. This is 2020 Thrive. This is going to be a fantastic year. And man, I've got our guest today, which is none other than Cobus Viking Visser. Now, this is a man that needs no introduction. As you know, Cobus, in this program of mine, Unleashing Potential, actually spent his time to help people walk over hot coals, immerse himself into cold water. But everything that he does is to truly unleash the full potential of other people. So, Cobus, it's great to have you back on the show. How are you doing?
Thank you, Doc Anthony. Yeah, it's great to be back, and it's great to talk about the topic today about challenging people and unleashing people's potential, but also speaking about legacy and the importance of building a legacy and leaving a legacy behind. I think one thing is important is as we're going in 2025, as you said, is how do we thrive in our life, but also help other people to thrive and be successful, because our success can impact future generations.
Absolutely. Now, the problem I think is with modern day societies, first I call it the look down society. Why? Everybody is looking down on their cell phones all the time and they're not communicating with people anymore. So a lot of, I can say, relationship building falls through the cracks. Now, if we're talking about legacy, there's, for me, sort of a time distance between, because people are living for the now on their phones and what do I do today and how do I survive this month? But the moment we speak legacy, it's put down the phone, it's let you cast your vision way beyond yourself, because legacy is something out there in the future. This time frame, talk to me about how you experience people's mindsets at this stage.
Yeah, I think apart from one thing that made me think about a year ago, exactly the same more or less this time, one of my friends passed away very young, still in his early 50s.
Mhm.
And, a few weeks later, there was his funeral. A few months or two, people still remembered him, still talked about him. And, just using an example, before you know, it's a year later, we're all going on with our life. And if you think about other people that have lost their lives that are not there anymore, their legacy just has a short-term impact. But people in 10 years, 20 years, probably never going to talk about them anymore. And everyone's going on in their life. And one thing that I realized is, apart from everyone being in the now, is if people don't have that same vision of where we're going, because if you don't know where you're coming from,
Mhm.
how can you know where you are going? Because you have to first define who you are and where you're coming from, who came before you. And that made me think, if I had to ask you a quick question,
Yep.
how would you have loved to go to your bookshelf and take out a book that was written by your great grandfather or by your father or by your grandmother about stories and lessons they've learned that they are passing down? So, how much would have that have meant for you?
Priceless, because you would have had part of a legacy. I mean, that's why I'm currently building my family tree, because I want to know, where do I come from. So there's something inherently in us and say, where do I come from? And you see, what did your dad do, what did his father do, what did his father do? And when you put that all together, you sometimes understand where all of a sudden, why would one of your kids have a flair for the artistic, as in the musical, what have you, things like. Nobody in our family is there. But if you go back in basically that heritage, you find, but hold on, it comes from way back. So as you say, sort of discovering who you are today based on what has happened prior to this event today.
Yes, because that's in our DNA. It's been passed through generations. And I think it's important for us to understand and be proud of our history and past and where we're coming from, who came before us, who opened this potential for us to be able to sit where we are sitting today. But in the same time, as you start thinking about past, it's also now starting to think about what is your legacy that you're going to leave behind that can be there for generations to come. Now, what is that impact that you're going to leave? Now, some say, yeah, it's I have my children and they're part of my legacy. That's great, but when you're not there, what is going to remind them again of the lessons they've learned so they are not destined to repeat it? Because that's one thing about legacy is when we learn from the past of legacy being passed down, we don't repeat it because we are learning from it. But because we don't know, we are destined to constantly repeat our, how can I say, the same thing over and over.
Great. Well, you know the story of the oil sheikh that said, I've been a very successful man. I discovered oil, and with that came camels were replaced. And as you know, we have the Lamborghinis, and we're doing very well. And then the children were absolutely just splashing all the money, driving the fancy cars. But by the time they got to the third generation, he said, back to the camel. Why? No one got taught how to maintain that level of living. And
Yes.
therefore, when we speak legacy, most generations only see 3 generations. And that's why I believe that we need to say, what is the key that will unlock for what I believe is called a 7 generational legacy? That is something that
Yes.
is on my heart. And that's why when you and I spoke, we immediately connect because let's talk about where we come from. I come from Denmark. You're a Viking. So it doesn't matter what we do. It looks like somewhere, somehow we cross paths because I know that my great great grandfather, which was Jan Tonderen, came from Denmark,
Yes.
from the city Tonderen. They then went from there to the Netherlands. And from the Netherlands, they actually came to Cape the Good Hope and on 17 October 1699 landed here on the ship, and I have the name of the ship. So I know exactly how my ancestors came to South Africa. Now, that is important to know. Where do you come from?
Definitely, and I think that sets the foundation of what you can build for the future. I speak to one of this family of my client of mine that has built the sort of generation wealth, and one thing they did to keep the strategy going is they sort of have this stories being passed down, what is expected, and how the business is being built. But they created the family trust that looks after the whole family.
Yeah,
I think they 8th generation now, and then one thing that they did is the family trust takes out life policies on every single member, right? Think
right.
about it.
Yep,
Every single member. So when one person dies, so everyone benefits from the family trust. But when one person dies, all of that money comes into the trust. So the wealth constantly just grows and grows and grows because there's this influx where they can expand and build. Now, by doing that, they put in certain rules, and this is where we talked about, the camel story. They put in certain rules, what is expected of the people and the generations to be part of it. They have to go and study. They
yep,
have to follow certain, how can I say, it's not a will, but it's sort of a wish list or a thing that has been passed down. This is how the family operates. This is our values. We look after each other. There will always be money for someone to go and study, etc., etc. So that is something that I was so amazed that he has a family that is building. Nobody knows about them because one thing is they don't not on social media. They don't want to be on social media. So they building this family success, helping their future generation. So they are leaving and building a legacy.
well, obviously, if it wasn't for the trust and it wasn't for the way that it was set up, there would not have been the future expectation of the legacy being left behind. Because you see, the legacy sort of has a past and it has a future. And as you
Yes.
say, we are challenged today to say, number one, will we embrace who we were in the past? Number two, will we basically band together as a family to realize that we must have stood for something? There's a saying, family is the cornerstone of society. And I really believe when families get together and make a pact and say, how do we want to be known in the next 40, 80, 120 years, which is literally 3 generations? Because
Yes.
today a generation is measured at 40 years at a time. And the thing is, at least a trust is a path, is a chosen path to get people to get there. But so many people
Yes.
go to themselves, I didn't even think of that. Now, the purpose of a trust could be to protect the family crest, to protect the family belongings. And obviously, it's never done in isolation. It's always done as a uh, team effort. But somebody has to lead it. And you know what? What I find is the key missing ingredient is the lack of leadership today. We don't have somebody in the family that says, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to call it, I will take this process forward, and that they take natural leadership because everybody is so inward focusing in terms of, what I call the unholy trinity, I, me, and myself, that they don't look outwards to see what we can do for others. So I think that is a bit of a paradigm shift. And you and I work with mind shift. So talk to me about how you work with people that battle with that mind shift to take accountability if they want to go forward so they can leave a legacy.
Yeah, I call it sort of also the rules of engagement or your code of honor. What is the code that you live by?
Yeah,
And one thing that is important for people to bring change is yes, you need accountability, right? But what is the code what is the standard you are setting for yourself? What won't you settle for? What will you not allow? But here's the thing is that most people don't do is now I have these rules. This is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be on social media. I'm going to go to the gym, etc. Whatever, I'm just taking that as example. But when difficult times comes and challenges times comes, they crumble. Now, there's two things that is important. One is your value system. What
yep,
is your values? The one thing I loved about the Vikings, they call it the 9 virtues of the Vikings or 9 values of the Vikings, right?
Yep.
They lived by certain standards and certain values that was important to them. And most people falter because they don't have a strong foundation of values. Now, what values does, if you take a paper cup and you put water in it, right? The paper cup is the values, and everything that you put in the paper cup is what happens in the world, is your money, it's business, it's family, etc., right? It holds it all together. Now chaos comes, challenges in the world. Imagine a fire at the bottom.
Okay.
What will happen with the cup? It will crumble.
Correct.
But let's say you use a ceramic cup and you lit a fire below it. Will it break?
It's gonna last much longer for sure. It will have to be pushed to extreme, if that.
Definitely, and this is your values, and this is why values are so important. But it's not only by living by them, because that's important. It's communicating it to other people what is important to you and what's your values that you live by. So, and also to allow only people of the similar values that you hold as well. The second thing about this journey is also is a discipline, right? Consequences. Now, most people, we grow up, I think, in an age that we grow up, that if we didn't listen to our dad or we didn't follow certain rules, there was really good consequences. Am I right?
Man, we remember, I call it the landing strip of love. My landing strip of love behind me feels it today still.
You only spoke once back to your dad.
That's
and if you did that, you knew what was coming.
Absolutely.
Now, let me ask you these questions. What is most people's consequence? I'm not going to the gym today. I will do it tomorrow. Or I'm not in the mood to do the following. I will do it tomorrow, and then never do it. And then before they know it, they live in a place where life is bad. It's only happening to me. But the only thing that they haven't done is they haven't put consequences in place for them, so that if they don't achieve it, what's the pain level? So to give you an example, I'm going to use a team environment as an example.
Okay.
I worked with the Southern Kings in 2017, and when we set out the code of honor for the Kings, one of the consequences was, if anyone, there's 2 consequences. So one is if you take responsibility. They walked in, guys, sorry man, I was on my phone, I dishonored our code, I will take the responsibility. So the consequence of that was, if you take responsibility, you're going to make coffee for the whole team, right?
Okay.
So it's painful, it's energy, but it's okay. I can handle it because I've taken responsibility. The other consequences is when you stay quiet and you don't say, and you're like trying to hide it away, and your team has to call you out about it, right? Then the consequences was you had to wash everyone's car.
Okay.
Now, that's 45 cars in a team, rapid team, right? Now imagine you will do it only once, break that rule, or one person will break it, and you will see what they do. You will never break that rule again. And that's the thing with people is that I've learned, and this is the thing with from the Vikings and any team that you think about it. There's consequences when you don't follow through. True. Your name is important. So what consequences are you putting in place for yourself that when you don't do something, that the consequences just fall into place?
I fully agree. And so, like you speak, to me, it comes back to the word discipline, because consequences is literally parallel with discipline. I have the saying, if you do not have self-discipline, the world has mandated to discipline you. Think about it.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's going to happen. And I joke around, one of my clients as well. He broke one of his rules, and so he's a big Liverpool supporter.
Okay.
And so he had 2 options. One, burn his Liverpool shirt and post it on social media, or buy a Man United shirt and put it on and says, from now on, I'm a Man United fan. It was so painful.
He could not have slept if he did that.
Understand? So it's so painful that I rather stay until 12 o'clock and do what I need to do than to break the rule. And, that's why it's so important.
Well, obviously now, so what you do is the association of pain with progress. So I really embrace that. And that is it, because let's face it, whatever we remember, there is a memory of what pain did I, at that point in time, live through, and what did I have to do to adjust so that the pain would go away. But that pain actually coaches you and sort of nudges you to find a way to get rid of the pain. And obviously I'm not talking about emotional pain because that's something else. But
Yes.
sometimes people put themselves in their own emotional hell, in their own emotional pain, because they don't deal with it. So part of the value should be when you do experience emotional pain, make yourself accountable to someone else so that you
Yeah.
can defrag, so that you can download, so that you can get rid of all of that stuff. But it comes back to that value is, will you keep the value in place? Now, when you spoke about the code of honor, I don't know many companies and or individuals that understand the code of honor. I don't.
Yeah.
And the thing is, someone has to start somewhere. And I know that you and I are big pioneers of helping people understand that and then into a value system. Now, why is it? Because you see, some leaders can see 30 years from now, 40 years from now, with the word legacy in terms of if you did the following A into B into C, you can expect a result when it gets to X, Y, Z. It's just the way it works. But if you did not have what I call, it's like a traffic light system. You need to have 6 green lights to get to your end destination. But we are often stopped at the first or even the second traffic light and forget even where the journey was heading. Now, what do you
Yeah.
do with people when you talk about legacy that just have the lack of seeing beyond? What do you do with them?
Yeah, you can just some examples. You can see some of these companies that are failing at the moment. Metal that is laying off people. Some of the mines closing down. There's Pick and Pay that has a long heritage that is not in sort of rescue. When you think about it, and it comes down to people don't know where they're going. They live in an instant gratification era where we need it now and we want it now. But I think there's a book that says, people will perish with a lack of vision, right? So vision, I think it's the most important. So how I
Absolutely.
do it, so how
Yeah.
I do it with companies, sometimes they can't see 5 years and 10 years ahead because they're so used to. So I start with what is at least in the next year you want to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple. And that's what I learned with the Kings when I worked with them, is that you only have time. So break down it. When I used to have my session and they say you have 20 minutes, guess what? There's no way I'm going over 20 minutes. 20 minutes, they would stop me even if I was halfway because the next thing was scheduled. And
Yeah.
I mean, that working it out for me is to say, okay, at least we have a year goal. Let's bring, even if it's a year vision of what we want to achieve the next year, at least people can somehow comprehend it and get the next line downwards to buy into it. Because one thing that I notice is most people want to know where this company is going. They want to know, is there a future for me? Is there something? Why am I coming to work every day? What are we building? The thing is, because most of these leaders are so lost in the world, they're so disconnected with their staff at the bottom that they don't know how to run a company anymore. They're running it from an MBA degree they learned in university that is not relevant today in the
True.
environment
True.
anymore. And so they're not up to date. And so they lose that vision. So my comeback is to just basically, what is one thing that we need to do? Break it down to quarterly visions.
Yeah.
Because the moment you start achieving it, you start challenging themselves because then you open the mind of potential of, but where can we be in 5 years? So one of the clients I'm working with now, we got them to believe it. What if you have to leave in 5 years? Your tenure is 5 years in this company. What is it you are leaving behind? And then we started working it back because you knew in 1 year what we achieved. And if we can achieve that in 1 year, what can we achieve in 5 years?
Absolutely.
So
Well,
we break.
Cobus, I support you there. For me, the term there is reverse engineering. And that is that, like Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. Well, what is your
Yeah.
end? Then take it from there and reverse engineer it. Now, what that does is that it causes a vacuum or a time frame. Now, there's always a short term, a medium term, and a long term. I think that's the first point we need to say to the individual. When you talk about your particular legacy, your vision, where you want to go, what is your short term framework? Is your short term a quarter? Is your short term 1 year? For the other person, short term could be 2 years. So at first is to define what is the time frame from short, medium, and long term to know
Yes.
how the people are thinking. I know a handful of people that will say short term is 1 year, medium term is 3 years, and long term is 7 to 10 years. Very, very few people speak that way. And because they can't even think about it, because they just think
Yes.
of COVID in 2020, how that interrupted industry. So which means their minds are caught into a period and they get stuck in 2020. Then now, as you now see, in 2024, we've had the acceleration of AI. All of a
Yes.
sudden, now that's the new point of reference. However, what about the people that in 2018 said, you know what, in the next 10 years, artificial intelligence is going to play a vital role? What are we going to do to embrace that so that our company can be part of those that leaves a legacy that will survive? How many companies in South Africa fail a month? 805 at this stage. Fail per month, which means there's people that come. What is the longest the average company lasts in South Africa? 5 years. Most of them don't make 5 years. So when it comes to legacy, and for you as a person that unleashes people's potential, how do we break through so that people think beyond the 5 years and literally have a vision that takes them where they can leave a legacy? What's your advice to them?
So one thing that I do is apart from the short-term things, is one is habits.
Yep.
So one thing is to look at their habits on a daily basis. What are they doing that is going to help them with success, and what is stopping them from success? But also the second thing for me that is important about this vision is that putting yourself, if you think about 2018 and 2020 and all these things that happen, most people look at themselves in every single year. Sometimes in today's time, a year is long. A lot can happen in a year. So imagine companies, we're going to do January our strategy session. And then we plan out for the year, and then next year we will do it again. But so many things can happen. So here's my thing is, have a quarterly strategy session.
Okay.
Individually, business-wise. Why? Because and this is one thing that I found working with companies and people, they don't really sit down. Yes, they do strategy and where the company is, but hardly they do ever strategy about what is happening in the world. Doing research, what can impact our business and what is going to impact the world, so that it doesn't surprise us and come as a surprise, but that we can become prepared for whatever is coming.
Yeah.
So I think that's the one thing, is that constant preparedness and doing constant research of what is happening around the world. Because the thing is, if you're not prepared, it's going to catch your pants on your knees, and you will fall. And by being that company that can be adaptive every sort of, let's say, quarter, that's every 3 months that you're looking at, 3 to 4 months, so you can be adaptive so much faster.
One of the problems is that when companies, some companies look inward, other companies look outward. And I think this inward looking and outward looking does play a vital role to understand that you need a symbiotic relationship. You need to look inward in terms of where you are, what you desire, but looking outward in terms of, you don't have to always compete with the competitors, but you need to be aware what the competitors are doing in order for you to establish your own niche. Because we know, a company, as part of the vision, is to say, what are they known for? What is their unique selling proposition? What is their niche market? So we all know that. But how often do they soundboard externally? I find that a person like you and me, we just stand there. By the time we've asked the fifth question, the people realize we don't know our business. We've been going down a certain lane and we've been following it, but we don't have checkbacks. We don't have a bounce off of what I call the soundboarding factor. So how important do you think that is?
Definitely. I think if you ever have an opportunity, read the biography of Visser.
Yeah.
How he helped build Shoprite and Checkers and the businesses. And a lot of things they did as well. They would go overseas in America. They went over there to go look at what, we call it competitors, but they weren't competing in the same markets. But what is their peers doing in other countries that makes them successful? Yeah. What works for them? If you remember, One Price store was in America, and it came back to South Africa. One guy brought it here, and it became the 5-rand store that was successful for a really good time being. So you can go overseas, because some of them are not going to come and compete here. But here's the thing is, all of this allows you. So Johan Rupert was one of them that, I think they had Rothmans at that time, or, they made the cigarettes, the tobacco company.
True.
Everyone was making those short cigarettes. I don't know if you remember, cigarettes used to be. And he came to his factory after doing research and his travels and says, but nobody is doing it and everyone wants to smoke longer. Is why don't we make extra length? I don't know. I think it was called the Rothmans extra length or something like that, right? And he came to his factory and says, can you make it longer? They said, no, it's not possible. He said, no, I'm giving you a week. And everyone like was 40 was crazy. And a week later, they brought out the extra length and they took the market because he had a different vision. He was looking at what is happening around the world and saw a gap in the market because he was doing his research. And look at that, built up one amazing company. And that's what it's about. It's constantly looking and making, well, let's say making friends around the world so you can learn from this.
But also then that calls for adjustment. You know, if you're entrenched in your ways and you're not prepared to look externally, and when you find something that could be palatable, it's for you to actually put your pride in your pocket and say, we care to dare. We care enough of our business to dare trying what we see so that we can become market competitive. And I think that is one of the things. If you want to leave a legacy, you need to go beyond what you are comfortable with. Because let's face it, people love being comfortable.
Yes. And there's a saying, the person with the most flexibility controls the situation. And that's the thing, is getting to out of that comfort zone and be more flexible. And that's the other challenge that I found with corporates and CEOs and leaders and business. And maybe that's why business fat, they're so stuck in the idea, you know, this is will always work. So it still should be working. We can't do it. I remember there's one client, he didn't want to do online marketing. He just believed in giving out flyers because that's how he was taught by his dad. And the more I say to him, that's old school flyers. Yeah, but other people are using flyers.
Yeah.
No, you have to change it. You have to go online. And it took a lot of challenging of the status quo to get him to change. And when he changed, it's like, why didn't we do it earlier? I'm like,
true. You know, the story about the 7 words to the death chamber. We've always done it that way.
Yeah.
There's your number one way that your company will die, because the moment you start protecting yourself, but we've always done it that way, that means you've got a lack of innovation, and you are not sincerely evaluating yourself and challenging yourself to actually get out of your comfort zone. So that's just what it's about. So, Cobus, today we actually just licked the topic of legacy. Let's just try and split 2 categories as we start landing this. Number one, let's talk about the legacy factor for corporates and companies. What should they be considering?
It's the impact on the community. So first and foremost is the impact on the community that's working in the business. What is the environment they're creating where, you know, in the past, you had people used to work 20, 30 years for a company. And now people are changing. So what is the culture you want to create in your company that can make an impact in the community? So they've done a study at, I think it was Harvard, that showed that businesses that cares for the community, that gives back, but it includes not writing a check for charity, but gets the people in the company to go together and give back and influence the community around them, as the opportunity that stays longer, that never will leave that business. Why? Because they're not there just for the money. They're not just there for, they're actually feeling they're making a difference.
Yeah.
So one thing for corporates for me is to move back towards not just giving checks out to charity and just like, oh, we've done our corporate commitment, but rather say, let's include an impact on our culture and our business, but also impacting the community outside, because that is the legacy we're leaving behind. Because that's the one thing most corporates do, is they forget those 2, but here's the third one.
What is that?
Is customers. I think a lot of corporates have taken customers, how can I say, for granted.
Yeah.
And this is where I love the philosophy around the Vikings and the legacy they've left behind and still impacting today, is community. How do we create a community where our customers feel they are part of our brand and our business?
True.
How can we do that? So that's that free tier, because you, a CEO can move on. Everyone can move on, but you still remember today of the brands that have had an impact on you that are not there anymore today. Am I right?
It's true. That's true.
And some of them are still existing. Think about Spur, think about Wimpy, you know, if I just take restaurants, some of them are still existing today that has left a legacy. The only challenge that I see with some of these businesses, they are busy transforming and they forget about what made them successful. And I think that's the one thing. So there's 3 areas that we need to look at: our customers, our employees, and the community around us that we're making an impact.
Okay, I like that. Customer, employees, and community, CEC. That's your corporate solution out there from the one and only Cobus Visser. But you know what? My last one, I'm going to challenge you. Personal legacy. Can individuals leave a legacy to be remembered, like the Ruperts? That's what I mean. Let's face it. you know about the Ruperts, whether you like it or not. What is your take
Yeah.
on that?
So the question is, what type of legacy do you first want to leave? Do you want to leave a legacy for everyone in the world? You can go and do it, and you can create a plan to be able to do it for everyone like the Ruperts to remember you. But what's the most important? And for me is the legacy of the next generation and generations to follow. So I'm busy. My book will come out in July that will help people like the normal person to leave a book behind that will guide them to write their own book. I'm going to challenge dads. I'm going to challenge mom, but let's say dads for now is leave a guidebook, a handbook for your son to understand where he's coming from. What's the values we live by? What are some of the lessons that I've learned? And then that son can have the opportunity to pass it down for the next generation, the next one. So it becomes like a handbook. But nothing, it can only stop there. So I've now incorporated someone as well. That what if you can write that book and can send it to someone and say, help me publish this book of my life lessons and my journey. So I've now just got my dad to do the same because I
Yep.
want my kids to, when my dad is not there anymore, and their kids to have a guidebook of this is where their grandfather was. This was his lessons. This was his stories, so that they one day can pass it down. So it becomes part of a family culture of passing down. And that's how, on a personal level, I believe you can leave a legacy. It's either writing a book
Yep.
or creating a video, a vlog of leaving videos behind that can be on YouTube, can be on all of these systems that probably can be there for a long time, that can be left behind for people to remember who they are, where they're from, and who came before them.
Well, Cobus, that sort of takes me to where I believe that the exercise of doing what I call being part of the family search, where you actually look at your legacy, where you look at your family tree, becomes more and more important in today's life to look back at where did you start from. And what I can just say is for people listening into this program, if you embark on the familysearch.org, where you know where you come from, please take the time to update the system in terms of what makes you who you are, what makes you unique. Just to find out that, for instance, your dad was a pattern maker. That's not enough. You want to know what lessons did he learn, etc. So I can clearly see that Cobus and I are on at this stage on a drive to make a difference, and will truly make a difference of helping people to reflect on what was beyond in terms of our dads, our parents, but also say, but what can you do to serve your community so that people will become part of a legacy that is to be remembered. So Cobus, what is your final thoughts as we end off today's program?
I think it's a quote by Mandino is that I am here for a purpose, and that purpose is to grow into a mountain and not to sink into a grain of sand. Henceforth, I will apply all my efforts to grow into the highest mountain of all, and I will strain my potential until it cries for mercy. So go and unleash your full potential. And with the hashtag live without regret. There's one life you have today. Today is the youngest you will ever be. So go and create a life that you will never regret, and that you build a legacy and leave a legacy for future generations.
Well, there you have it, the great Cobus Viking Visser, in his own words, and you want to make sure that you get hold of cobusvisser.com. Go and look at everything the man is doing, because you know what? He's got a vision. So the people 50 to 100 years from today will look back and say, thank you, Cobus. Thank you, Anne, for what you guys did, so that we are better equipped today to know how to drive our communities towards the future. And from my side, as you guys know, I've written a book called How to Leave a 7-Generational Legacy, because I believe that is what the problem is, that normally after 3 generations, no one knows what has happened. But if you follow the right principles, and I speak about what keys you need to unlock to get to a 7-generational legacy, and remember to learn from the wisdom, people like Cobus Visser and other leaders, so that we all together can embrace this universe and make it a better place. Cobus, thank you. And to all of our people out there, remember, you need to unleash your full potential. Do it.